All right, so this piece here has an uneven rim. And how do I know that this piece is uneven when I sit it on the wheel head? Well, I can use my needle tool. I'm gonna, rather than centering from here, and you can see it's not quite centered yet, I'm gonna draw a line on the top. I'm holding my needle tool steady and just letting it draw this line. And you can see it's touching the clay on this side and not touching the clay on that side. And that just means that this side is lower. I had a wobbly rim when I was working on it, and I didn't get that fixed. So one of the ways that you can adjust this after you've already thrown it, obviously when you're throwing it, you can cut off some of that rim. But at this point, I can still deal with this. I can get a little bit of clay underneath that side. I'm going to wipe away my line here so I don't get confused about which line is which. And then I'm going to draw that line again. I'm going to draw from above. Now you see I've gone a little too far in the other direction. This side is now higher where I've got this wad of clay. So I'm going to adjust that piece of clay down a little bit. I'm just going to squish it a little bit more. And I'm going to set this piece back on here. Again, wipe away my line. So this is tedious. Not fun exactly, but you can see that it allows you to deal with a piece that otherwise you'd really struggle with trimming. All right, let's see if that's any closer. You can also, after you've done this once or twice, you can see why it's important to cut off that rim so things are nice and even so that you don't have to spend your time doing this. I'm going to add, I'm getting my higher point kind of to the side over here, so I'm going to add a little bit of clay over on this side and see if that helps me with this. Another way you can trim something like this is you can actually put it onto a chuck. You can throw yourself a chuck and trim it on there, and that's fine as well. So now I'm a lot closer to even. Looks like I'm still just a hair high over here. And then, of course, you can see that I'm not quite centered. And so besides getting it level, I'm also going to need to center it. And so I'm going to start to do some of that as well. So this is the circle's happening here, which means the circle needs to move this way. In order to do that, I've got to move the whole pot this way. And I know I'm going fast here. If you're trying to do this in the YVC studio, I recommend you come get some help. It's a little tricky to kind of figure out the first time you're doing it. Now you see that line I just drew went all the way around the edge. I've also got about the same thickness on either side of the line. Now this, of course, isn't the most even mark that edge that I've got here, but it looks like I'm pretty close to centered. I could check that down here, although things aren't quite even on this piece as well. Looks like this piece, when I was throwing it, got a little off. And that'll be, that'll happen to you when you're beginning. My recommendation on something like this is that you get it fairly close and then you go ahead and start. It's never gonna be quite perfect because the pot itself isn't quite perfect. And so I'm gonna go ahead and use my wads to secure this down, and then I'm gonna go ahead and trim. So the first thing I'm gonna do is clean up this bottom edge with my large loop tool. Next thing I'm gonna do is clean up this side with my large loop tool. Remember that your wrist turns, and you can get around here and cut some of that clay away. Now after I've basically got things cleaned up and nice looking, I can go ahead and draw my foot ring in. About 2/3 of the way out. So I'm going to draw the outside there and the inside there. It doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be completely perfect, but you don't want it way on the outside, you don't want it super skinny. So I'm going to start with my large loop tool, although this is a relatively small bowl, and so I may not use my large loop tool much. Remember, you are trying to create a curve, and in most cases you want to have this foot, this ring of the foot, distinct from the bowl. Now, I tend to trim feet in one way. My feet all tend to be very similar. And so if you'd like to find out other ways that those feet can look, I'd recommend you watch other videos, look at other people making stuff, try out some other things. Because there are some people who make the foot almost invisible on the side of the pot, but they still trim it in place, so they still get some of the thickness away. So that's about all I can do with the large loop tool. I'm going to switch to the small loop tool, and I'm going to use the corner here in the middle, because the corner allows me to cut more clay away a little bit more quickly. Now I need to know what my inside looks like, and I can't really check that at this point, so I should have already checked it. And of course I've done that, I just didn't discuss it as I was getting this piece ready. I want to make it look like this curve in the inside continues into the exterior curve. Right now this looks like a little more of an angle. I want it to be a little bit more of a curve. So I'm going to get in there and start to create that curve. Get your eyes down on the side of this because the top view is different than that side view, and sometimes you miss a kind of thick part or a corner kind of looking thing by keeping your eyes in only one place. If it's uncomfortable for you to get your eyes down there, stand up, walk away, look at this thing from a distance. It's easier to do it right in the first place than it is to recenter it because you have to use the line and mark it again and then put the wads back in. So I've got this edge coming up here. That's going to be sharp later on. Scratch up the table, scratch up my hand when it's fired. And so I'm going to get in at a 45-degree angle with this loop and just kind of cut that scridgy stuff off. So with a small bowl like this, it's reasonable to make a narrower foot as long as you are comfortable in knowing that you're not going to go past that edge. So you can come in from the inside or the outside edge on that. Knowing the thickness that you've got in the rest of your bowl is important so that as you trim, you're not trimming too much away, but equally that you're not leaving it real thick through the whole pot. You can leave those lines visible if you'd like. You can use a rib or a wooden knife to get rid of them. You can also use a rib or a wooden knife to help clean up this edge. Some people also use to get just a little bit of water on their finger and they compress that way. I'm going to pull this off of here and hopefully I'm in good shape. Otherwise, I'll check, either way, I'll check my wall thickness. My wall thickness is pretty even throughout. My exterior matches my interior. It doesn't look like I've squished the edge just a little bit on that side, but it's in fairly good shape. And now I want to get my maker's mark on there before it dries up. Use a finger on the inside to support that maker's mark. Check that this sits flat, and I'm done, and I'm ready to fire this guy. Dry it and fire it.